We all pod down here. We all pod down here. We all pod down here.
They were startled and frightened, thinking they saw a ghost. He said to them, "Why are you troubled, and why do doubts rise in your minds? Look at my hands and my feet. It is I myself. Touch me and see. A ghost does not have flesh and bones, as you see I have." Luke 24:37-39.
Welcome to We All Pod Down Here. I'm Brittany.
And I'm Dan.
And today we are going to discuss The Wailing from 2016. So we did some real quick cursory research for this. So I'm going to have Dan start us out with some of the stuff he found. But listen, we just watched it, and now we figured we just kind of record our thoughts and kind of what we felt about it. So, Dan, Take it away.
More of an instant reaction kind of thing this time. So, The Wailing is a Korean horror film. Really, really deep. There's a lot of context in this. So, our main characters, Jung-gu, he's our main character. He's a police officer. We have a Japanese man, he's kind of unnamed.
Yeah, they never really... he's the Japanese man, I think, is pretty much how he's billed throughout this.
Just like a mysterious element. There's Moo Myung, who's the woman in white. We have a shaman. And we have Jung-gu's daughter, Hyojin, who is a very important part of this. So there's a lot that goes into this flick, that how it was made. The original title of this in Korean is Gakseong, which is the town that the movie is made in, which is also the director's grandmother's hometown, and he spent a lot of time there. And it also means whale in Korean, hence The Wailing.
Convenient.
Yep.
So for kind of my basic notes I took on this, I didn't really take them all, but we were watching it, but one thing I found that was interesting that I didn't realize was that a large percentage of South Korea actually does have a Christian and Catholic religious base, I guess, whereas a lot of Asia does not. So
a lot of Asia is more with Buddhism.
Buddhism or no religion at all, from what I've gathered. So
there's been a lot of missionary work in Korea. You know, a lot of it probably during the Korean War.
Oh, that makes sense. From what I gathered back in 2015, when they did a census, they found that 56.1% had no religion, 27.6% was Christian or Catholic, and 15.5% is Buddhist, with 0.8% other. Even though obviously less than 30% doesn't seem like a lot for an Asian country, that's pretty large. So that kind of surprised me.
That is a big amount for sure.
But so basically this film has a lot of themes. There is a lot of Christian symbolism, but there's also a lot of both Korean folklore as well as folklore from Nepal. We get into this movie and just kind of a quick analysis. Oh, and I guess before we start, I should say spoilers, because this movie had a lot of twists and turns, so if you don't want it spoiled for you, I highly recommend going and watching it first, because this entire movie we were like, wait, is this what's happening? Wait, no, is this what's happening? And we just were guessing the entire time. I really feel it's one of those that it would almost be ruined if you watched it. Listen to this first. So.
This movie is a psychological thriller. It takes you makes you run the gamut mentally. And yeah, I think a lot of what we're going to talk about is diving into a lot of what goes into it, a lot of try to unsheath the mystery of some of the finer points of this movie. Yeah. And I'm sure there's a lot of things that we probably didn't pick up on, missed, etc. Because this is a very deep movie. It's a very long movie.
Yeah,
it's over 2.5 hours. Yeah, I think it was 2 hours 35 minutes. But it's not like one of those longer movies where you feel like it drags. This movie doesn't drag at all. Doesn't feel like you're there for 2.5 hours.
No, for sure. One of the things I was going to go into with, I guess let's just dive into some of the themes throughout it. While we're watching this, there's parts where it seems like people might be possessed. They could be also on drugs. They mention mushrooms. So you're like, okay, are these people just all accidentally got into bad mushrooms?
The mushrooms was a great red herring.
Yeah, it absolutely was. There's actually some stuff I was reading on Reddit where some people legitimately thought that was like, they're like, no, I think that this literally was just all like people on mushrooms and that's all it is. I'm like, no, it's definitely not. You need to rewatch this movie.
Mushrooms don't make you kill people.
Well, I mean, I'm sure there's been cases of someone accidentally killed someone because they thought they were a demon or something.
Sure. Not to this level, though.
Yeah, no, definitely not. But again, I thought that I could see how someone could think that initially, but it feels like by the end of this you should have realized that was not the theme.
The abstractness, though, of this movie can really lend you to think that conclusion could be what's happening, though. And that's part of the brilliance, I think, is that there's a lot of conclusions you can make. And you could all be right, you could all be wrong.
Yeah.
And, I don't think any singular perspective of this movie is essentially right. And I think that was by design.
Yeah, but so, like, we're watching this, though, and I'm thinking, okay, is there, like, a viral outbreak? Like, we got the horror theme of viruses, and then there's people that have these little, like, blisters
like
on
boils
them.
And stuff.
Yeah, and I was like, oh gosh, we have a plague going on. So we went from, like, regular, like, drug-induced madness, virus, plague. Later we have this thing that essentially, for all intents and purposes, is a zombie. And we have
supernatural themes.
Yeah, supernatural themes. We have themes of possession, ghosts, demons, sorcery,
spirituality, everything.
and then just the religious horror of it all, as well as some xenophobia. I mean, the main character that ends up, that you referenced, our Japanese man, everyone seemed to be like, real like, oh no, he's the outsider.
And there's history with that, with Korea and Japan.
Oh, yeah,
there's
because of
definitely
the early
been tensions over the years.
Yeah, because in the early 20th century, wasn't there like a lot of Japanese colonialism that happened that caused a lot of issues in Korea?
For sure, and that kind of bias has carried over to some degree. Especially like this is based around a small town, probably has a lot of prejudices, etc.
Yeah.
It's just that it's an existing thing.
Exactly.
And it plays off of that really well.
Now, most of the themes were more Christian, Catholic, as I mentioned, the folklore of South Korea as well as Nepal, but also when you really think about it, there's the part where they're taking the photos of people like that are dying, like they're victims essentially, and a lot of, correct me if I'm wrong, is it African folklore or not folklore, I guess wouldn't be the right word, it's either African or might be South America. There's a lot of history with people not wanting their photo taken because they believed that was stealing their soul. So that's what I kind of got out of the photo taking, was that it was like their way of like a more modern take on the stealing of their soul, and that's how they were taking their soul from them.
And I love how, like we said, it integrates a lot of different belief systems into this movie, and doesn't really avert to one specific one being right.
Yeah. And I like that, this could be a slight translation issue, because a lot of times they refer to stuff as either ghosts or demons, which I wonder if there's not really quite the same word for it in the English language, in the way that, I'll have to look up the word again, because my pronunciations in Korean are not great. I'm much better with the Japanese pronunciations, but where in Japan you have obviously yokai and you have yori, and the yori is the more like ghost, like spirits. But I always feel like it's not the same way in the English language ghost. Like we think of the ghost like the white sheet and just the, boo, scare you. Whereas I feel like theirs is more like much more spiritual.
It's very much more spiritual, much more profound.
And their version of demons is not like we see demons in the version of hell and demons coming from Satan.
Good
like,
demons and bad demons.
Yeah, you have a lot of like the yokai that weren't necessarily bad. They had good yokai. So I feel like in Korea, probably their folklore had something similar, which I didn't have enough chance to research how their folklore would have delved into that. But when they referenced ghosts or demons, I was like, I feel like this is so much deeper if I knew this language better.
For sure. And again, that's one of the brilliant things about this movie, is that it brings together so many different themes and so many different belief systems. And are they all correct? Probably not. And I think it really, it's like a life imitating art kind of thing, because no belief system strictly is correct. That's always been my viewpoint, is that, like, straight Christianity isn't always correct. Straight anything isn't always correct. You have to take in all points of view to things to fully understand what's going on. And I love that abstract viewpoint of this.
Well, it also reminds me of the part where he's talking to the priest about what he saw, and the priest says to him, well, did you see it with your own eyes? And he's like, no. He's like, well, how can you feel this is real if you didn't see it with your own eyes? And I'm thinking, well, that's a giant fucking dose of irony right there. The priest being like, you can't believe something if you didn't see it with your own eyes. I'm like, your entire goddamn religion is based on this. So that...
Yeah, that he's like, let the doctors do their work.
Yeah, and it's like, a part of me is kind of like, yes, the doctors should do their work, but at the same time, I'm like, clearly something else is wrong in this scenario. You think the priest would be there to help at least?
Yeah.
Maybe, and the worst part is, the priest was older. We had an old priest and a young priest.
The power of Christ compels you. A really good thing based on the director, Nya Hong Jin's loss of some really people really close to him, and his personal journey of trying to find answers why this happened to these people ties right into this movie, like the idea of why and trying to find answers. Jong-gu cannot figure out, why is this happening to his daughter? Why is this happening to his family? What's the reason? And the opening of the movie shows a fisherman baiting a hook, and the idea of that, well, you just took the bait. Hook was there, you just somehow took the bait.
Yeah, it's just and that's even what the shaman says to him at one point when he's talking to him. He's like, well, why your daughter? What sin did you commit to your daughter? He's like, sometimes just a line is cast and you just happen to be the one that's caught. Like, it's almost like the idea of it being random.
Randomness.
Which is kind of how I view stuff in many ways, because, as you know, obviously my dad died very suddenly when I was a little kid, so I spent a lot of time as a child and growing up being like, why me? Why my dad? What did he do wrong? All this stuff. And I kind of got to the point in life where I felt like, if there's a God, if there's a higher power or something, I don't feel that they're sitting there actually controlling things, because if they were, that would really suck. And I feel like it's more like we're given our own free will and everything, and that kind of like the ball is set in motion, but doesn't control where it goes. So again, sometimes bad things happen. They're just random.
Yeah, and if you have, like some like higher power that's literally controlling everything, everything's mapped out, then free will is an illusion. I feel like the idea of, here's the blueprint, let's see how this works out.
Well, they do have those studies they've been doing where they're trying to prove that this is actually, we all live in a simulation.
We're all in the Matrix.
Yep.
Keanu Reeves, please save us.
Yes, right. Oh, I love Keanu Reeves so much. I just want to say he's the sweetest person.
He seems like a wonderful human being.
I would love to hang out with him.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
But I will say that when they did the scenes with the exorcisms, they have far more colorful exorcisms than we do.
Oh, for sure. Like the rituals and the music and the pounding drums, it was pretty beautiful.
Oh, no, it was, but I just was thinking, like, we always have the priest with just the black robe with the little, like, white collar, and that's it. Whereas, like,
the vomiting and the...
Yeah. I'm thinking of the movie, literally, The Exorcist, how, like, but again, that was very, like, plain and everything, what they did.
Much more low-key.
Though they did have he had that purple sash he put on him. I guess that was, like, his one little bit of flair.
His piece of flair.
Yeah,
what are we, in Office Space now?
Yeah.
But he just wanted to do the bare minimum.
But yeah, so they didn't do the bare minimum in this, man. He went all out for that.
No, full on.
But his arms had those like colorful bands all the way down them and everything. I was like, wow, this is an exorcism I'd attend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was entertaining.
Granted, that's not really what was happening.
But it was really ominous.
Yeah.
Like the whole ritual was very ominous and a very important scene of this movie.
Why don't we go into that a little bit, like what happens in that? Because I think that would be a good kind of...
Yeah, so a lot of this is about, there's the premise is there's these brutal murders in this small Korean town, and they don't know what's going on. And they're trying to figure out what happened. The main character is a police officer. So it kind of starts out with him trying to figure out what happened as a police officer. And he has a friend who's another police officer. These two guys are Keystone cops. They're idiots.
There was a couple points in the movie where you and I were laughing because...
They were just bumbling.
Yeah, because you were like, this is almost like...
It's like Keystone cops.
Well, no. So at one point, though, you said something to the effect of them being...
like Harry and Lloyd from Dumb and Dumber.
Lloyd.
Yeah, it's like the two bumbling morons as cops.
Yeah, so like
they
it had
are
just
awful at their jobs.
But the thing is, I feel like that comic relief was like actually put in there on purpose. I don't feel that was. Like,
I do too. I think it was more dark comedy kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't think that was us like doing our normal riffing, making fun of stuff. Like I legitimately think they meant for these parts to be funny.
I think they're made to make these guys look inept, and they were absolutely. Jong-gu is always late, constantly for one reason,
and always has an excuse.
And the chief is always like, "You always have an excuse."
He's like, "Oh, you blaming your daughter this time?"
Yeah, exactly. But it turns from police investigation to his daughter starts to get affected. His daughter starts acting funny, and it gets to more of a personal investigation. So it transitions from him doing his job to him figuring out what's going on with his daughter.
And the grandma lives with them, and so
The grandma's wonderful, by the way.
Yeah, no, I loved her, but she...
Foul-mouthed grandma.
But yeah, she realizes obviously something's wrong. She calls the shaman, says he's supposed to be the best shaman. We've come to now realize, obviously, the shaman is not the good guy.
He's not what we thought he was, or hoping he was.
Yeah, but so this shaman, you've realized throughout this that he's probably been the one that comes to do these ceremonies to help all these people that are all suffering through this small little town. And each time what he's doing is actually removing the protections that would be there. So talk about the situation with the totem.
Yeah, exactly.
During the exorcism.
And he, like you said, he does these rituals. There was the point where one of the murders where they find all the 3 bodies in the well.
Yeah.
Where you see there's different artifacts and stuff around that made it look like a ritual happened.
And it probably did.
And it probably did. And they're all brutally murdered anyway because he removed the protections. I think he did a ritual there, and that's why they all did.
Yeah, and that was the guy that also early in
was in the truck because
because it said
the coat.
It said Park. I forget what his last name was.
It was Park Shon Bay.
Okay.
And it had the name tag on it, and you saw the body in the truck also had that name tag on it.
No, I was talking about the people in the well. Were they actually related to that guy?
Yes.
Because I thought that the guy.
There was a connection.
Okay, because I thought that was... I'm probably thinking of a different murder scene where it was the guy they knew from earlier that was the first one to see the demon in the woods.
Oh,
and
okay.
He was the guy that owned that store, and he put his store up for sale. He wasn't going hunting in the woods. He was showing them his freezers were empty and everything, and just was like, I'm not going back there. And then they make him go back there, and the dude literally gets struck by lightning.
Yeah. Oh, really? That guy? No, it was different. It was.
I didn't think that was the guy in the truck.
No, because at the end they mentioned the name, and then the guy in the truck had that name tag on it.
Yeah.
Moon Young, the woman in white, was wearing a jacket with his name on it at one point. So it's like she tried protecting them, but the shaman.
Was that the jacket she was wearing at the very beginning? Mm-hmm. Okay, I didn't even pick up on that because it just clicked in my head. I was like, wait a minute, she had that green jacket on in the beginning.
Yep.
But that was also the religious themes in that part where she's throwing the stones. It's like, he's without sin cast the first stone. And so, she's the one that's actually without sin casting the stones at them like, hey.
Exactly. Hey, pay attention. Yeah. I'm going to try to help you people.
God damn it, let me fucking help you.
Mm-hmm. And, throughout this, it's hard to figure out
who's good, who's bad,
who's not. Because you start thinking, well, this woman in white, Moon Young, there's something off about her.
And it's not actually her name, to clarify. That it literally translates in Korean to no name. So that's basically saying no name is her name, because I think they mostly just refer to her as the woman in white, but technically the Yong is no name, I think is what it directly translates to.
But with her, you're guessing, you can't figure out, is she on their side, is she not? And then the shaman, you're thinking, okay, he's got to be on their side. He's trying to protect them with this big elaborate ritual.
And the woman in white was very kind of sketch and
very nondescript.
Because she shows up at one
vague.
she shows up at one of the crime scenes that the house has been burned down, and she's trying to explain she was there and basically trying to help them. But again, her vagueness I think is part of the problem. But I know that sometimes in folklore and stuff, that is part of the problem, is that they can't give you the whole story. They can't just hand it to you for whatever reason.
You have to. It's the thing about belief.
Yeah, you have to come, and that's kind of what happens almost at the end, even with the evil spirit, the Japanese man, where he says to him, "What are you? Show me your true form." And he says, well, you already think I'm the devil, so I'm the devil, basically, because basically no matter what I say, it's not going to change what you think.
And he says to touch him just very much like that Bible passage.
Yeah, touch me, I'm flesh, therefore I cannot be a ghost.
And that man was a Christian priest, and you think, is he seeing what, it makes you think, is he seeing what he wants to see when the man kind of transforms into a demon-y creature?
I feel like, in my opinion, that he's not just seeing what he wants to see, I feel like he's seeing what the reality was.
Kind of thing. Yeah.
That said, being that he looked very devil-like, what he sees may be more how his religion would perceive it, whereas if someone who was, let's say, from Japan or somewhere else that didn't have that same religious belief, they might see some other type of demon thing that wouldn't look the same. So it's almost like, it reminds me of in the Mothman prophecies, you remember where Indra Cold says to him on the phone, he's like, what do you look like? And he says, depends who's looking.
That's a good one. That's a good connection. Let's talk a little bit more about that ritual scene. So you have 2 rituals going on at the same time.
And they almost look like this is
one's affecting the other, and this is brilliant.
Yeah, and especially the Japanese man purposely picks all black chickens. And his actual ritual, apparently a lot of that's based in the ceremonies from Nepal, but his ritual looks like it's the typical, what you think be the evil ritual, everything's dark and evil looking. And the other one, that's the shaman.
Very colorful.
And all the chickens are white. And
the goat was white. too.
The goat was white, yeah. And remember, it was before the ceremony, they had that goat that gets hung up like entrails all.
It was a black goat.
And it was a black goat.
Yeah.
You see it like the yin and the yang. But I think part of the point with the yin and the yang is that while you have the dark and the light, there's also that small speck of the dark and the light on each side. So it's kind of like all within each other.
Yeah, and it's a lot of it's like the shaman's rituals are a total deception, because you think he's putting protection on them when he's actually removing the protection so this demon spirit can pull off what they want to pull off. You see, the demon's doing a ritual, but it's like spirit transference.
Yeah, because he's transferring into that guy that's dead in the truck.
Bay's body. That's why when you see the body come up as a zombie, that's the evil spirit infiltrating that body. And the trade-off is that Park Chun-bay's spirit is in that of the Japanese man.
Yeah, so they threw me off when I first watched it because you see the moment they stop the ritual, it seems like almost like he dies once, and they've been like, you know, destroying the totem and everything, and then the daughter is just like losing it, and so they stop the ritual. And at that point, then the Japanese man kind of seems like he comes back to life. Yep. And so again, it does a great job of tricking you, because you're watching that and you're like, crap, they stopped the ritual and now he's alive. And
now he's fine, but in reality, he pulled it off.
Yeah, in reality, it doesn't matter, because all he was doing was removing protections, whereas the Japanese man was switching bodies, and that's why you saw the body start to move in the truck. So when the guy who actually is now in the demon Japanese man's body, you see him run down the truck and he sees it's empty, and he's like, obviously, like, where's my body? And
he's panicking, yeah.
And you see when he first, like, wakes up in the body, and he's just, like, he's shivering, he's cold, he covers himself, and then the next day he goes, he sees the body's gone, he's just confused out the fucking wazoo.
Exactly.
And we're all, like, led to believe that we're like, why is this like this way? It's very confusing.
And when Jong-gu and his friends go and try to intimidate the Japanese man, the guy doesn't react to anything. He's stoic. He's stone cold. They trash his house and kills his fucking dog. And
the poor puppy.
Well, it ended up being a hellhound, so maybe.
What was it? We don't know for
we
sure.
Don't know. We don't know. But that was a pretty powerful scene. That Jong-gu goes and just trashes this guy's place, accusing him of being this entity, and to leave before he kills him. And the guy has no reaction, doesn't say anything. And then after this transference, you see the Japanese in panic and stuff. You're like, you know, there's a personality difference.
And I was confused by that at first, but as time went on, obviously it made sense. Once the thing I want to reference, though, when he tells the Japanese man you have 3 days to leave, I wonder if that was referencing also when we're talking about the Christian themes, you know, wasn't Jesus supposed to be in the cave for 3 days and then rose after 3 days? I'm sure that was some kind of connection.
I'm sure there was a connection there. Yeah. That's a good metaphor.
Side note, the actor that played the shaman, not the Japanese man, God, I hope I don't mispronounce his name, I believe it's Young Min Hwang, and that scene, that whole ceremony, he filmed that for 15 minutes straight without a break, and it was just one long take he did it in.
That is freaking impressive.
Yeah, so I just wanted to give him some kudos for that, because I was like, wow, that's
because that
impressive.
Was intense.
Yeah.
And such a good subversion.
Also, side note, because I was very worried about this when we watched this, that I was worried about the chickens. So I was like, this can't be fun for the chickens. I was like, I hope these are either fake or... Apparently they made sure none of these animals were harmed. The only animal that technically was harmed, which was not considered a quote-unquote higher animal, is the worm at the beginning. But the other animals, there was no harm. Apparently they had a lot of counseling and animal trainers under, like, strict supervision. And the virtual effects people filled in anywhere else that was needed. So no animals were harmed that were not the worm.
Good. I figured. But that's definitely good to...
Poor Shah Halud.
To confirm. I know, right? By the way, I watched Dune. It's awesome. And, you know, this ritual is like, it's such a good bait and switch. It's one of my favorite scenes here. And then after that ritual, we have Jong-gu and his merry band of people. They go and...
Merry band of idiots.
Exactly. And they're going after the Japanese man. And the body transference has already happened. And the zombified Park Chung-bae comes out and just starts attacking them. And whatever they do, they are not stopping him. Especially when they just plant a rake in his head.
And he just pulls it out like it's fucking
And it breaks it off, and then he just pulls the rake out like nothing. And then they're beating this thing with shovels and whatever they have. And he bites the priest. the zombie bites the priest. But then they see the Japanese man hiding. And they start pursuing him.
Well, they start pursuing because remember the zombie all of a sudden starts twisting around and just collapses.
Like convulsing.
And so I don't know if that was supposed to be him just realizing that could see the Japanese man now. And he's like, great, I will go ahead and...
Oh, yeah, he wanted them
out here.
He wanted them to go after him.
Yeah.
Because that's part of the plan.
Yeah, so he got to the point he realized he was there, so he was just like, kerplunk, and played dead or whatever. or was really dead, I guess, because it's a dead body.
Yeah,
But
and they're chasing him, and this guy's scared out of his wits.
Yeah.
And rightfully so. You know, your spirit was transferred, and here these group of idiots are trying to kill you. So he's running and running and running, and you see him getting to, like, the end of a cliff. And he's gripping the lead, and they're not finding him. He falls, he gets hurt, but then he sees the woman in white.
yes, when he falls, he's kind of like obviously hurt, and he's trying to hide, and he's wedging up against the rock, and he sees the woman in white. And this is where we know, once you're at the end of the movie, you realize that she is pursuing him. Possibly either to save him, or I don't know what her plan was at that moment. But
I think she was trying to save that man's soul.
yeah, so she's chasing him, but the thing is, from the perspective of it, you don't know who's chasing who.
Exactly, you don't
and they
know.
Apparently, originally were going to make it more obvious, I guess, that she was chasing him, but they wanted to keep it as ambiguous as possible, so they made it where it's not really obvious. You just see blips of one running, then the other running.
Exactly.
You don't know who's chasing who at this point.
And I think that was a really wise choice.
Yeah. For sure.
And then you see the Japanese man, they're all driving away, and you see the Japanese man crash into the car.
Yeah, because while they're driving, he's trying to get hold of wife, and then, like, swerves and almost hits a truck, and then swerves all over the place, and then all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, something crashes into the windshield, and you're like, the fuck? And they get out, and they realize it's the Japanese man's body.
Yeah, but here's the problem. The evil spirit is no longer in that body. It's Parchun Bay. So that's the spirit that's in the body. And you see on the ledge, the woman in white's kind of watching. And the big kicker here is Jung-gu and his buddies roll this body over the cliff. He's like, all right, we got him. Let's get rid of him. And it comes up later. There's a major issue with the movie that really leads to the conclusion is Jung-gu's sin. His sin was that he killed this man, an innocent soul. He rolled him over the cliff. And it connects to the real penultimate part of the movie at the end, where it was really important about the sin that he committed. And he doesn't understand what he did wrong. And fast forward close to the end, if you're good with going there.
Yeah, he comes to the hospital, sees the daughter and the wife and the grandma, and they seem like she's better. He's all like hugging her. Everyone's happy. Seems like everything's good. He tucks her into bed and whatnot, and the grandma's going to sleep by her that night.
And then she's gone.
And then you can tell something just seems off with him. Like, he seems concerned, obviously. And the shaman's been calling him, so he ends up driving over to the shaman's house at the same time the shaman has driven to his house. And when the shaman's there, all of a sudden he like reaches up and touches his nose, and he's got a nosebleed. Then all of a sudden it is just pouring out his nose. And he's vomiting, and the woman in white steps out, and she's like, what are you doing here? And she's like, get away, get out.
And you wonder at that point when...
Is she good? You don't know if she's good.
Blood shooting out in the vomit, and it's like, is he having this reaction because he's in the presence of an evil entity? Or is he the evil entity having a reaction to the presence of good? Exactly. And you don't know. And that's a really gross scene.
But so he books it out of there.
He books it, yeah.
And he gets back to his place. He has this like crow that comes in and it's like flopping around, it's dead. He gets real freaked out. And again, this makes it look like something evil is coming for him.
Exactly.
So he gathers up a bunch of shit and he bails. And while he's leaving, going down the road, out of nowhere...
Locusts. Lots of locusts. And it's just pattering over the windshield to the point where it's like, turn off the windshield wipers, it's only making it worse. And he can't see, and the car gets out of control, he gets out screaming, there's nothing there. So it's nothing but an illusion from the evil spirit / the spirit that's in the Japanese man is making him think, so he goes back and finishes this ritual.
That I didn't understand that was why he did it, why he was going back. I thought the plague of God kind of thing, like being like going after the evil, and that he was the evil that was being going after it that way.
Because if he goes away, the ritual doesn't finish.
True, and I didn't think of that until you pointed that, but the other thing that's interesting about that is the locust, though. When he gets out and you realize they're not there, I was again thinking, did he get like some of these bad mushrooms or something? And that's why now he's tripping too. So again, I can see
this whole small town is tripping.
Yeah, so one giant trip, this entire town.
It's like Frank Reynolds and goes, I'm trying to trip balls.
Well, we had the crow, like,
exactly.
I ate the crow. It's eating up inside. But what's interesting is, then he comes back. As he's going back, he's calling...
Jung-gu. I hope I'm saying that right.
Yeah, he calls back and he's calling Jung-gu.
There's like tons of missed calls we see.
He's calling Jung-gu and finally gets in touch with him. He's like, where are you? And he's like, where are you? Like, because he's like, well, I'm at your place and all your stuff's gone. But he's like, you got to get back to your house. You got to get to your daughter. And I think this is when both the Japanese spirit and him have realized that the woman in white has now done something to protect that house.
Because they can't pull off what they want to.
Because right now only innocence is within the house. Because he's left for whatever reason. And so they need him to go back there essentially to break the seal.
Exactly, because it all goes back to Jong-gu's sin of throwing over the Japanese man's body that contained Park Chun-bei's spirit. And
Now,
that's his sin. So if he goes back there, he takes away the purity that the woman in white has put over as a protection to his family. So essentially him going back enables the evil spirit to finish the job.
now what's weird is for a moment though, the daughter's gone because initially when he gets back there, remember he runs in there and finds she's gone. And when he finds she's gone, wakes the grandmother up and wakes the mom up. They're all looking for her. And when he leaves, that's when he's looking for her outside of the property. That's when he sees the woman in white. So I don't know if she put the protection up like very quickly in that time, or if the protection was already up, she couldn't activate it until he was out or something.
Yeah,
I wasn't fully clear on that.
It's kind of ambiguous, I think, how
it
that
doesn't
worked,
take away
but
from the movie. I
no,
just wasn't
it's just
clear
that
on it.
his presence couldn't be there. He could not be there for them to be protected.
Yeah.
And we get to a really great scene with dialogue between Jong-gu and the woman in white. And she's telling him, you can't go back until a certain thing happens. And the connection with this is Simon Peter's denial of Jesus. That's a direct connection there.
I remember I called that out because she tells him, you can't go back until the roosters crowed 3 times.
Yep.
And the second that happened, I was like, wait, are we referencing... And we had to pause the movie for me to double check.
Yeah,
make
and
sure
it's
it wasn't in my mind.
definitely a reference. So, for those who don't know the story, Simon Peter, Jesus said that you will deny me 3 times. And people associated him with Jesus, and he said he denied it 3 times. And the connection here is that the woman in white tells Jong-gu, you have to wait for the rooster to crow 3 times. Once the rooster crows 3 times, you can go back, and then your family will be safe. But he doesn't know who to believe here.
And that's the tricky part. I didn't know who to believe.
Well, neither did I. And the woman, and he asked the woman, who are you? He wants something tangible. And she can't give him that. She's like, I'm trying to protect your family. I'm trying to protect your daughter. And the shaman represents something tangible. This guy isn't really a man of faith, anything like that. So he doesn't feel this, like, to be able to make that leap.
Yeah,
Of
that leap of
belief,
faith.
a leap of faith. He couldn't leap to believe the woman in white. The shaman's calling him, telling him, no, you can't believe anything she says. She's saying, don't believe anything he says. He is so conflicted, so confused. So, and the rooster crows twice. He is in full panic, and he just takes off to his home.
And she just
And the woman in white
screams.
just screams.
Yeah, she screams no and just...
Because she knows he's damning his family, essentially.
Yeah.
And when he runs back in, there's I don't know what kind of plant it was, but as soon as he
It looks like some kind of herb of some sort.
as soon as he crosses that
Mushrooms.
threshold, mushroom. As soon as he crosses that threshold, it just whittles and dies like instantaneously. Really good effect, and
Essentially,
really
the
poignant.
barrier's been broken.
Exactly, he broke the barrier. The protection is gone,
And now the evil can
the
get in.
damage that evil can do its deed, and the damage is done. And at that point, he finds
his wife and she's like cut. Well, first he walks in and there's like blood fucking everywhere. Because, I guess back up a
and
little
the daughter's
bit.
just standing there, right?
Well, you don't see her right away, but back up a little because initially the daughter, when she comes back and when the woman in white tells him your daughter's already home, but then again you gotta stay here because he's asking where she is. So somehow she went away and came back, and I don't fully understand where she went and came back, but I don't know if that was like part of maybe she put a protection on her and then sent her back, and that's kind of what activated the protection.
That's possible.
I don't know. But something's clearly still wrong with her because she's literally just sitting on the floor in the kitchen just eating fucking everything. And
this is the second time she did that in the movie.
yeah,
It's
she
like
was
the
just
demon
because she was eating
itself.
fish one point, and again, that's also probably some symbolism to an extent. You know, like the fish symbol with Jesus and everything. So
And the 7 deadly sins.
yeah, so because I read somewhere that they reference either directly or indirectly reference each of the 7 deadly sins, and so obviously the one where she's just like eating to no end is obviously gluttony. So she goes in, and now jumping back to where we were, he goes through the kitchen. It is just a fucking bloodbath in there. He opens this back door, finds the wife dead. It looks like her throat's cut. He's trying to like wake her and like get her back conscious, and he's obviously just like traumatized, sit down. The daughter then is just like standing in the doorway and just staring at him. And then we cut back to, I believe that's because we also throughout this time are cutting in between the priest going to see the Japanese man.
Yeah, and
He
the
goes to
Japanese man is
who we thought was dead.
Yeah, but he isn't. And
He goes into like a cave.
yeah, and the priest asks him, just tell me who you are, and I will
says,
leave
show
you
me your true form.
and I will leave you alone. And he goes like, what makes you think I would allow you to leave?
Because and there's gaps between that, but what he said at one point, you see like a hole in his hand, and I was like, is he supposed to be almost like a stigmata kind of thing, showing like the situation? And that's why, like, again, you're led for a second to believe that, oh my gosh, what if he was, obviously not dead, he was the good spirit or something,
Yeah,
and you're still
like
fucking wondering
like
at this
Jesus
point.
or something, like to the holes nailed to the hands from the cross.
And I think it's also supposed to be the priest. When him saying that, I think is probably also alluding to like when Jesus looked the demons and he says, "Tell me your name. Our name is Legion, for we are many." So there's a lot of, in all like spiritual belief, it always seems like there's a lot of power in a name. So he's trying to get him to tell him his true form and see who they are, and he tells him like, it does, you already think I'm the devil, it doesn't matter what I say, you're gonna believe what you believe. And so he ends up gradually becoming what looks like a demon or a devil, like more like the Christian idea of a devil. The red eyes, the horns, the creepy,
hairy,
like
all the way, like the body hair and
the claws on the hands. Like he has like fingernails, but they're like claws basically.
And he's taken his picture. And the symbolism of taking the pictures is good, because when Jong-gu and his group of morons, when they break into the Japanese man's house, they find like all these pictures of all the dead people who died. And
it wasn't with the group of morons. It was just with him and his partner.
That's
and they
right.
brought the priest, which was, I guess, I think the priest was supposed to be the partner's
just a
nephew.
smaller group of morons. Yeah, it was the police partner's nephew. And they find that, and they also find his daughter's shoe, which, like for like the idea of demonic possession, they need an item.
Well, and what's interesting if you think about it, and this is what I think also made him freak out, thinking that the woman in white was the bad one here, because if you look at the part where he took the shoe, who throws a shoe? Honestly, sorry,
Random task.
I know. So
random task. Show them what you do.
So, but the woman in white was collecting like the upper body belongings from the villagers to protect them. So like she had the beret, and that's what he saw that, and I think he thought something was wrong. But in all reality, the Japanese man was collecting the lower parts to curse them. So I think it's supposed to be kind of like the heaven-hell dynamic, the lower, as in like hell's below you, heaven's above you kind of thing. So she was collecting the upper body, items to protect them, which also probably is why she had the jacket on.
Exactly.
So
it's a lot of like the opposites. You don't know what's going on. It's like, which George Costanza's the real one? That one or the opposite? You don't know. The opposite, everything goes right for him. So everything's turned upside down.
You gotta get your Seinfeld reference.
I did. It was a little bit of a
you.
stretch, but I got it. But this movie is brilliant.
Yeah, going back to the scene where we see the Japanese man turning into the devil, I kind of feel like that was him just being, again, I think I may have alluded to that earlier.
What he thought, what he wanted to see.
So he saw what he wanted.
His idealized vision of what he thinks this man is.
And again, this is like I referenced earlier in the Mothman prophecies, where depends who's looking, would this look more like a typical Japanese yokai, which I shouldn't say typical Japanese yokai, because there's like so many
but like
yokai.
If it was like Jong-gu looking at him, for example, he doesn't really have like a spiritual belief system, really. So what he's just going to see that man, probably.
That man, or would he see? I'd be curious, like how he would interpret evil, like because it feels
it's more of a mental thing. I think it's more of like, it's not a visual interpretation. It's more of a mental interpretation. He thinks this man's doing bad things. Okay, he's bad.
Yeah, it's like you wonder though, because he saw the demon in the woods earlier. Is that what someone else saw with that demon in the woods? Is that their interpretation of evil?
Yeah, exactly.
And what's interesting, because I mentioned, remember how he says the guy's just wearing they refer to it as a diaper, like, it's like that. I like thinking that's Austin Towers show, like, hey, diaper lady, I got my diaper for you.
Oh, I pinched the rosebud off there for you. I pinched it off too soon.
I left the rosebud for you. But they have that kind of what looks almost like that quote unquote diaper, like the sumo wrestlers or someone wear. Yeah. And one thing I didn't notice, that I don't know if you noticed, is that the evil demon thing in the woods that was eating like the deer, as in the shaman, when he's changing, they have that same type of diaper thing on.
Yeah.
So that was supposed to be like kind of a little foreshadowing as to like these two are in cahoots.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about that till later.
Everything's done. Family's destroyed. Shaman comes back. And the shaman shows up. He's investigating the scene, and he starts taking pictures of the bodies. And it seems like Jong-gu is alive, but
Yeah, because he's mumbling stuff.
I don't know if he's like dying in a state of shock, but the shaman is just taking pictures of all the bodies. And to rewind a little bit, the clue that him and the Japanese man / evil spirit are connected is when he's taking these pictures, he opens the trunk, he takes out his box, and he spills it.
And there's all
What's
the
in it? All the pictures. All the pictures that the Japanese man took. So there's our defined connection between the two.
Yeah, because there's the deleted scene where they make it obvious, but I feel like the director
the director thought this was enough, but the deleted scene's really good, and I highly recommend checking it out.
Yeah, just check it. It's only like 2.5 minutes.
It's like 2.5, 3 minute scene. You can find it on YouTube. So the deleted ending was they show a family at like a bus stop. You see the Japanese man at a stop on the other side of the road, and he's trying to tempt the child, and he's like holding up a toy. The kid comes, mother grabs the kid, brings it back, and here comes the van that the shaman was driving, and the Japanese man gets in there, and they speed away. And then you see the woman in white come up behind them, just staring off into the distance, like, crap, they got away.
Yeah, also I think implying
continues.
that she's going to continue to follow them.
Exactly,
possibly.
The pursuit continues. And they cut that out. The director thought it was pretty obvious that, like you said, that they were in cahoots. But it's a really good scene, and it ties it together kind of nicely. I don't think if they would have included it, it would have made it better or worse.
No, but I kind of like that it's in a way ambiguous, but not to the point that you wouldn't get it earlier in the movie when they come back to the Japanese man's house and he sees all the photos are gone, which they had cell phones on them. This movie was made in 2016. There's multiple parts where you see him taking cell phone pictures. I'm like,
oh, for sure.
How the fuck were you people not taking photos? You're police officers. And I realized they weren't supposed to be there and whatnot, but maybe take it just so that...
But these are dumb police officers.
I know.
They're not very good at their job.
I know. But so
it's like if you have 2 Paul Blarts or something.
Yeah. The Japanese man claims that he burned them, and you look and he sees in the kitchen there looks like there's some burned stuff. And there's one part where you see the jolly band of idiots. One of them's going through the kitchen. You see all these film strips hanging down, like, for our young audience that doesn't know what a film strip. No, I'm just kidding. But
35 millimeter. What the hell is that?
Yes, but they had them just like hanging down, and he's kind of like walking through them. And it occurred to me that I'm like, fuck, if the other guy had been here, he would have probably realized that, like, here's the film we fucking needed that was supposedly was burned. So clearly it wasn't. We kept the negatives.
Yep, always keep the negatives.
I've been trying to think though, because with the symbolism, we have the fish, we have the goats, we have the locusts. I also read that if you pay really close attention, you count, there's 12 deaths, and there was 12 apostles.
Oh, that is good.
There's also 7 possessions.
7
deadly sins.
That
and
is
I was like,
really interesting. There's so much underlying
there's so much
here.
hidden.
There's so much juicy detail to this movie, and I don't think this could have possibly been done any better.
No, I absolutely fucking loved it. At some point I want to go through and try to figure out each of the 7 deadly sins, like which ones were which. Like gluttony clearly is obvious, with him seeing the kid, the kid eating a ton. Lust, there's a scene where, and I wasn't the only one that thought this, because I read online a ton of people thought this as well, that there's a scene
when
where...
he has sex with the woman in the car.
Yeah, he's apparently banging his wife in the car, but you don't really get a great view of her, and so I thought it was some random woman he was banging in the car.
Or like someone who's someone who helped them keep their place, even if that was the case, they were doing a really bad job, because that place was kind of a mess.
But I was thinking his sin for a while was the cheating and stuff, and then later, obviously, now that I know that was his wife, it's like, well... Yeah.
But it could be lust, because, the kid obviously saw it. It's like, I've seen it a few times. No big deal.
And then envy, I was trying to think where we could see envy, and, obviously Sloth, though, he was late to a lot of stuff, a bit lazy.
Oh, of course. He was absolutely Sloth.
Wrath, also, obviously, when he loses it and just, destroys... kills the dog, destroys the Japanese man's place. I'm trying to think. Pride? Where did we see pride?
I mean, he's very prideful and...
But it doesn't have to just be him. That's what I'm trying to think. There's other characters that could have been... Because it's pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, wrath, and sloth. And then, the counters to those are humility, charity, chastity, gratitude, temperance, patience, and diligence. So I felt like that if we dug deep enough, we could find almost
I'm sure there's examples. I'm sure they're in there.
Well, the 7 deadly sins, I wondered, and no one said this, I just kind of wondered, if we look really carefully at the 2 characters that obviously are evil characters, do they do any of the opposites? Because obviously, when he's destroying the house and everything, he's really calm and, he's really patient about the whole situation. And it's deleted scene where he's trying to give the kid a toy in a way. It's charity and stuff like that. It's all these little things that could end up being the opposites, were the actual evil ones doing the opposite of the 7 deadly sins.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just was wondering if that was...
This movie's full of it. And again, like I said earlier, throw your belief systems out the window for this, because all or none could be right. And that's a lot of the point. And the ambiguity in this movie really makes it, and it leaves such a lasting impression with you. So, brilliant stuff. You want to get down to
our
a rating?
ratings?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's start with Skulls. That's our just overall as a film. Out of 5, what are you feeling?
It's a 5.
I've been debating 4 or 5.
I don't throw 5s out very often, but I look at a movie like this that gets all the right notes correct. I love psychological horror. This is like the creme de la creme of psychological horror. It has so many themes, so many underlying possibilities, so much aversion. It throws you don't know. It's such a roller coaster ride. You don't know what's up, what's down. You don't know anything. Everything you can be thinking could be completely wrong.
Yeah.
It is such a ride. It's brilliant. The acting is brilliant. Everything was brilliant with this. So for me, it's a 5. It's one of the best psychological horror movies I have ever seen, and that's high praise for me, because I'm not
we
one
really love
who
psychological horror.
We do, and I'm not one to throw out a 5 very easily. I left this movie totally floored.
Yeah.
And kudos to Korean horror in general. They have been smashing it out of the park for a long time.
Yeah,
but
if you somehow haven't watched Squid Games yet,
watch Squid Game. It's great.
Yeah, because we won't
Squid
obviously
Game,
get
Train to
into it on
Busan.
here.
There's so much quality.
Obviously, it's
from
number
that part
one
of the
in
world.
the entire world right now. So again, if you haven't,
And rightfully so.
Yeah,
It's
if you
not
haven't
just
seen it yet,
hype. Like
go watch
just
it.
because a lot of people who might not typically watch something like this might be all about it. The hype is real. Watch it.
for sure.
But yeah, this is a 5 for me. What do you think?
I'm gonna give it a 5. I kind of was like, when I was like rating it on IMDb, I did 9 out of 10. I didn't feel it was full on 10 out of 10, but if we're going out of 5, I'm going to give it the full 5 out of 5. But if it was like a larger scale, I might not. Almost nothing's perfect to me. There's always going to be little things for me most of the time. There's very few films that I would truly get. Like Jurassic Park's probably one of the only ones off the top of my head that I can be like 100% no problems with this movie.
The Empire Strikes Back. Perfect.
And again, that's also one of them. You know, Wrath of Khan. I don't even care. It holds up to the test of time.
Yep.
God damn it, J.J. Abrams, don't touch Star Trek ever again. Anyway, one thing I also, with the acting, I wanted to point out that Hyojin, the little girl, the daughter, the actress apparently practiced modern dance for 6 months leading up to this so that she could perform the scenes where she was being possessed, where she's like kind of going nuts. Now, have you seen either Suspiria?
I've seen the original.
Okay, I'll say
For sure, yeah, the original is great.
Yes,
I haven't seen the remake.
It's actually very good. I still like the original better, but it's one of those where the remake wasn't a problem kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of remakes, obviously, I could rant for a week about. I was reading a thing
maybe
online.
we'll do an episode of remakes. Why?
Yeah, there's so many remakes that are like, why'd you bother doing this? The remake of Suspiria is very good. It held very true to the original. The only time I'm okay with it is when they do something totally fucking different, usually. Like, for example, The Mummy, The Invisible Man, where they kind of like, here's this general little idea from the original, and now we're going to do a whole fucking different story and a modern spin.
Exactly.
Great. You know what? That's fun. I like that. Because it's a whole different story. It's not just let me try to reinvent the fucking wheel.
Yeah, like the Omen remake. They changed deaths for random reasons, and it was just a big fucking mess.
Yeah. But it's like when you have something like The Fly, it can be fun, or the Blob remakes. Like, even the original's still fun, too. But then there's one where it's like, why'd you fucking bother?
Yeah, exactly.
But Suspiria, again, we should watch at some point. The new one is very good. But a lot of that, in both the original Suspiria and the new one, there's a lot of that modern dance where people almost look like they're convulsing in various things. That is just like really fucking wild to watch. So apparently, like, kudos to the actress, because she looked pretty young. I mean, she probably was under 13.
She had some acting chops.
Yeah, she was great.
I mean, she was so believable that you felt her performance. Like, when she was possessed and screaming and stuff, I mean, this kid is legitimately amazing. And the whole cast was great.
I was checking her age out of curiosity. So she was born in 2002. This movie was made in 2016. So actually, she probably was about, at the time of filming, probably around between 12 and 13.
That's impressive.
But again, it's like, that's just like, my God, like,
you don't get
top fucking notch.
You don't get many preteens acting that well.
No, for sure. But yeah, for me, 5 out of 5 for the scariness of it.
I'd say a 3 for me. There's a lot of, it's an unsettling movie. There's parts that, and this made me really happy, there's no jump scares really at all. There's none of that kind of like,
it's just
cheap
the
trope.
dread.
It's the overall existential dread of what's happening, and it's scary in like, you don't know what's going on, what's real, what's not, who's good, who's bad. It ranks more of a thriller in some ways to me. So throughout the movie, I wasn't really frightened, but I was so like locked into the story and trying to guess what the hell's happening that it has a lot of scary moments for sure, and it will mess with your head. It's very psychologically brilliant, but it's not like out and out like frightening to me, I guess. So I'd say a 3 out of 5, and that's not a detriment to this at all. It's just it's not the kind of movie that invokes a level of like that level of scary.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 4 only because I feel like there's most movies now, for whatever reason, the older I get, movies don't tend to scare me anymore whatsoever.
Yeah, I get it.
Even like a jump scare, it's like, okay, that startled me for like a second.
Startling isn't scary.
But I feel like the existential dread of all of this, a lot of times, like throughout this movie, I was just like, felt like my heart was racing at certain parts, especially like we don't know what's going on. The zombie thing when he's like bleeding into his mouth a little bit, I'm just like, oh my god, like, I don't know, for me, I'm gonna give it a 4. I feel like if you saw The Exorcist and you felt that was the scariest movie ever, because
And for a lot of people it is. My
like
mother...
Your mom won't even watch it again, will
No, she watched it once, scared the bejesus out of her, and she will never watch that movie again. She doesn't even want to talk about that movie. It scares her so much.
Whereas it doesn't scare me at all, and that's not a detriment in any way, shape, or form to it. I think it's one of the best movies ever.
Yeah.
But that's...
The amount of horror we've seen, there can be some desensitization, you know?
I think for me, things that are scary, like when I watch a horror movie, I don't watch it necessarily to be terrified. Because I feel like most things, like, especially stuff that like relies so hard heavily on gore, always doesn't, like, almost annoys me, because it's like, you're grossing me out, but you're not really trying to, I feel like you're not trying to scare me. It's lazy. You can do so much to make stuff bloody and gross, but really at the end of the day, is that really scaring me? Whereas like you have movies like The Strangers where these random people just go around killing people
for no reason whatsoever.
Yeah, and that's kind of like in the vein of like Michael Myers and stuff like that, where, you know, and Jason and all those, I think one of the scariest things about them is the fact that it's random. Not like you were targeted for a reason. It's not like, you know, okay, with Jaws, all I gotta do is not go in the fucking water and I'm fine. You know, Jurassic Park, alright, I just won't go to the island filled with dinosaurs.
No movie encapsulates that better than Black Christmas for me. Because it's just, there's no rhyme or reason. It's just random wacko.
Yeah.
And again with this too, like you said, like, you know, the whole metaphor of the fisherman and fishing, there's really no rhyme or reason. It's just kind of like you were there and you caught the hook.
Yeah, and it's like wrong place, wrong time kind of thing. I guess for me, it's the existential dread of stuff. I think it's the scariest. There's a great no sleep story. If I remember, I'll try to link it in one of our show notes or something, that was supposed to be a guy that says, basically he's like, tonight I met someone that claimed to be the devil, and I think I believe them. And that's
one of my favorite ones that I've...
Oh my god, when I read that, I remember the comments on it on Reddit was somewhere someone said something to the effect of like, well, there goes my good amount of existential dread for the rest of my life. So for me, I'm going to give it a 4.
That's
Again,
fair.
If something like The Exorcist and stuff like that is like really like that kind of thing horrifies you, this might be a bit much for you,
This
honestly.
might be a 6 for you.
Yeah.
I mean, like...
This goes to 11.
I mean, like, for me, I guess my 3 would be a high 3. But
yeah, like if you were given a 3.5.
Yeah, I was sucked more into the thriller aspect of this, of like figuring out what was going on in the psychology. I really wasn't freaked out, scared or anything, but I can see like for vast majority of people, this can be a pretty scary movie. And like you said, if The Exorcist creeps you out, this is gonna mess with your head big time.
For sure.
So you should watch it.
Yes, because then you can have fun.
Yeah.
For music and sound design,
I would say there's not a lot of music really in this, but the sound design's very good. Yeah. You know, like the cracks and stuff, like with the contortion and stuff, is good. It's a dialogue-heavy movie. Yeah, really. For sure. I'd say that sometimes you can ruin sound if there's too much going on. Yeah. It can distract from the Exactly. It can be distracting from what you're trying to see. So I would say sound design, I'll give it a 4.
I was going to go with a 4 as well.
Yeah.
Partly because I love the scene with the ceremony and the drums and all that.
That was brilliant. Yeah. And it stuck with me. Yeah, it was so intense. That part, one of my favorite scenes of the whole movie.
A lot of it was less is more kind of thing with this with sound design, but I feel like it deserves to be like, of the sound they put in there, it was really impactful. Exactly. Therefore, great job. So... 4 for both of us?
Yep, agreed. 4.
All right. And for effects?
Effects, I'll go with, I'd say, a 4.
I was feeling the same. 4.
Yeah, effects were great. Everything was poignant. Everything worked. They didn't have to do anything over the top, but everything was very impactful, well done. The scenes that were, like, the murder scenes and stuff were very gory and, like, blood everywhere. Like, not like guts or anything, just blood everywhere.
But like even like the goat hanging upside down looked realistic.
Exactly, like the entrails hanging from it.
Like the little pustules and boils all looked realistic.
They did a great job with
the only thing I take away from it is there were parts where there was cuts on his face. And every once in a while it seemed like they healed a little faster than I felt like they should with time going by. Again, that could be...
There's parts of it where he was like, had more blood on his face, and like when you've cleaned that up, that might be like what the residual of what's left.
Yeah, and it could be something that's totally fine, but again...
Visual effects were great.
Yeah, overall great. Yeah. For gore...
Mind
if I go first?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so I thought so. I was going to give it a 3, mainly because while there is blood, there's not like a whole lot of overt, as we've said before, if you can't handle a drop of blood, probably horror is not for you, but...
Yeah, and,
again,
the thing is, there's enough scenes where like there's like a lot of blood where you can probably avert your eyes a little bit.
Yeah, it's not the overall of the movie.
No, it's not the over.
But you have scenes like the goat hanging upside down with the entrails. You have, to me, gore can also be the pustules and stuff like that. Those are gross. You can have, again, the guy vomiting is very gross, you know, so... I feel like those...
That was gross, man.
Yeah, vomiting in the part with the blood that, like, dripped into his mouth. I was just like...
The combination of it.
Yeah.
Because it's shooting out of his nose and his mouth, and there's vomit, and it's just like, wow.
Well, that part, but I'm talking about when the zombie thing kind of had, like, the blood dripping out of its mouth and dripped onto Jong-gu, and it's like, I was like, oh god, it's getting in his mouth. And I was just like, that's how you become a zombie. Don't let it touch you. Which I don't think this was actually supposed to be zombie, so zombie rules don't apply.
Transference at that point, so...
But it still was, again, it's still gross, it's still upsetting, but I don't feel that it was something that was, like, over the top.
Yeah, for me, I would give it a 4 for that.
That's
because fair. I think this, and again, this movie is a perfect example of a movie that uses those moments, the more disturbing, like, gratuitous scenes. The effect is perfect. The effect is impactful. It's not done just to do it. So many of these movies will just have all this violence and gore, and it's a major problem for me because they're making up for an absolute shithole of a story. This movie has a great story, and every violent moment, everything with all the blood, like you said, like the vomiting, the entrails and stuff, it was all very impactful, very poignant, and very fitting to what they're trying to portray. And it was all done really well.
And you know what I'm going to say is like a random side thing that has nothing to do with our rating, but of like the realisticness, like kind of, not really effects, but the realism of it. How many fucking movies out there do you have a sex scene where the people just like roll over like there's no cleanup whatsoever? Whereas when they bang in the car, you see them like both grab tissues and start cleaning up, and I was like, fucking thank you. Like, why does it always have to be like this like real nice neat thing that you fucking know it's not?
It's not.
So the fact, like, I'm gonna give them a little like thumbs up for their realism in that part.
The only way it's like that is if you're Cosmo Kramer and you faked it.
Or Chandler, where he does that with Monica, where he's like, yeah, like, I faked it. You faked it?
Yeah. Like, I love when Jerry goes, you faked it? Yeah, is that enough? Or he just want to get some sleep.
Good lord. All right. For references, why don't you, because we kind of threw this together quickly, so why don't you say your references first and I'll say mine.
I know we both use Wikipedia for...
Obviously, Wikipedia, IMDb, so like our givens.
Filmcolossus.com had a really great in-depth overview of this and confirmed a lot of our thoughts, so it's a wonderful article. Check it out.
Yeah, I'll do my best to link these all in the show notes. For me, there was a real detailed explanation, I guess, of a lot of this there was a Screen Rant article I used. And there was another one that I believe, and I apologize if I'm pronouncing it in this person's name wrong, so it all kind of ran together as one word, but I think it's supposed to be akashsebastian.wordpress.com that had a real in-depth analysis of it. With that, though, again, thanks for listening to our incoherent
wailing about the whales.
Incoherent wailing.
And no, this is not about hunting whales.
Bad, though.
It's not about hunting whales, so don't think that.
This movie was terrible. There were no whales the entire time.
There was no Moby nor Dick.
Oh no, there was Dick.
Oh boy. But the movie's great. I highly recommend you check it out. This is the kind of movie that reminds me why horror is awesome, and other movies remind me on why it can suck sometimes. But this is an absolute gem. It's gotten almost universal praise, and rightfully so. This is a masterpiece, and this is a must-watch if you're a horror fan.
Yeah, so, again, thanks for listening to our amateur rambling. Until next time, this has been We All Pod Down Here.
I'm Dan.
And I'm Brittany. Bye! Thank you for listening.
Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe.
Share with your friends and family.
And check out our website at www.weallpoddownhere.com.
Or send us an email at weallpoddownhere@gmail.com.
You You can also follow our shenanigans at WeAllPod on Twitter.
And at WeAllPod down here on Instagram.
And feel free to suggest a movie you want us to review or just something you want to make me uncomfortable with.
Until next time, this has been WeAllPod down here.
Be afraid. Be very afraid.